Hello and welcome to the third podcast with Dena Merriam. I'm very, very excited to have Dena back with us and to discuss something which is very close to my heart. And I'm sure a lot of you will gain a lot of insights from Dena's wisdom on this highly popular, everyone's talking about it, this whole concept of law of attraction, manifestation. And you see all of this all over social media these days, or maybe it's just my algorithm going all into all of this kind of stuff, quantum jumping, quantum leaping, 3D, 5D, and all of these things. So today, I want to bring to you the concepts from the master and just lift the curtain on what did our Vedic masters actually uh, how did they actually create and what was their philosophy around manifestation, about fulfilling your desires and feeling your way uh, through it and all of those things. So I'm very, very excited to bring on board Dena Merriam on this topic today. Hi, Dina. Welcome back. Welcome back to the third episode of The Eternal Life. Namaste, and it's lovely to have you back.
Hey. Namaste.
Namaste. So, Dina, today I'm very excited to bring up this subject, which a lot of people are talking about, and there's a lot of information on social media, and this whole concept of law of attraction, manifesting your way through your thoughts, and just thinking positive, and then there's also things like uh, quantum jumping and lot of stuff out there. So today's topic, what I want to do is I want to gain insights from you from from a Vedic perspective. How did the Vedic masters actually what was their approach to thought manifestation or mind over matter and things like these? So very curious to know what was the approach in the Vedic culture.
That's a very timely question because as I've been writing Sita's Yoga, the Yoga of Awakening, I've had to the extent possible, project myself back into the Treta Yuga. And it's as difficult for us to grasp the consciousness of that time as it would be from someone in Kali Yuga, say 500 AD, to talk to them about the internet or to talk to them about AI or to talk to them about sending robots to Mars and a man to the moon. I mean, they simply didn't have the ability to comprehend this. So we are as far ahead of them and just think the Treta Yuga is that much further ahead of us. We're in the early stages of Dwapara Yuga, where we now can harness energy and are developing technology. So we've really advanced from Kali Yuga consciousness. But Treta Yuga is far ahead of us. So what was the consciousness like in Treta Yuga? And of course, there are people in every age that live in Satya Yuga consciousness, Treta Yuga consciousness, Kali, because we're all at different stages of our soul evolution. And so you can live in that consciousness now, but that takes a lot of spiritual dedication and practice. So in Satya Yuga, there was unity consciousness. There wasn't ego consciousness. So one knew oneself to be part part of the universal spirit. And so that's why you have stories of seeing the Devatas. The Devatas, the early Vedic stories of the Devatas being on earth because the veil between the worlds was much thinner. You could see across dimensions. Perceptions were heightened. Uh, and as that's where the Garden of Eden story comes from. So in that yuga, the mind had great mental abilities to manifest. Whatever you needed, manifested. So you didn't have to toil to grow food because you didn't have to eat so much. And there was plenty of food that were just, nuts and grains and fruits. And so what you needed manifested because you were completely in tune with the universal consciousness. Now that as the yugas are determined by the rotation of our solar system through the galaxy. As our sun and our solar system rotates and comes closer to the center, it's heightened spiritual perception. As we move away, we lose that spiritual perception. So in Treta Yuga, there was a loss of this unity consciousness, but the rishis sought to maintain that consciousness. So they drew out of the ethers mantras. Mantras initially were to help regain that unity consciousness. They knew that by reciting certain sacred vibrations, you could unify again with that cosmic consciousness and retain the consciousness of Satya Yuga. But with further decline, the mantras were used to manipulate the external environment, to control the weather, to bring the rains, to earth and to bless. I mean, they were used for external purposes, not just to regain unity consciousness. With further decline, even that became weaker by the time you reached the end of the Treta Yuga, and they developed rituals. All of this was for that desire to regain the consciousness lost, the unity consciousness. But with further decline, the rituals just became rituals. So all of us have the potential I mean, that is the spiritual goal, to maintain, to realize the self, to realize the non-separability with all that is, unity consciousness. In that unity consciousness, the mind naturally produces what it needs. But we have desires and we have greed, and that taints that ability. It's one thing to manifest what is needed. It's another thing to aspire for things that are not needed but desired, right? Because desires perpetrate new desires and new desires. However, the laws of manifestation are the laws of manifestation. And whatever we desire, we do attain, not necessarily in this life. So suppose you're frustrated you can't find a good partner, and yet you yearn for a beloved, for a human partner. Depending on karmic conditions, you might not attain it in this life, but you will attain it. Suppose you yearn for riches, and yet your karmic conditions are such that that's not what's given to you in this life. You will attain it at some future time. Whatever is nesting in the heart comes to fruition. But we have to begin to see ourselves as having many, I don't call it many lives, many chapters. It's like a vast novel with many chapters. And everything doesn't come to fruition in one chapter. You have to read the whole book to see how the whole thing plays out. And that's how we should look at our life, is that whatever doesn't get satisfied in this life will be satisfied at some point in the future. However, it's part of one's sadhana is refining one's mental abilities. And the deeper you go into your sadhana, the more practice you do, you see that things begin to manifest. For example, what you need shows up, but we're not always making the connection. So it's like, oh, isn't that, I just met this person. You need a friend, right? You're yearning for have a friend. And suddenly a new friend comes into your life. You might not make the connection that this is something that you've been needing. But if we become more mindful, more attentive to the connection between our inner and our outer life, we'll see how much we already, in our current state, how much we already are manifesting.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And there are times when you go into certain states where even when you thought about a person and it happens like pretty much like very frequently because maybe at that point you're in a good state that you think of a person, the person will call. I mean, that's also a sort of manifestation.
Exactly it. That's what I'm talking about. There are no coincidences. We are powerful beings in terms of our capacities, our capabilities, and how often when you're thinking of somebody, they call you. How often that happens. We don't realize how powerful our thoughts are, which is why we have to be so attentive to our mental condition.
Yes, yes. And while we're on the subject, what is the root of desire? Like, let's break that down, because there is also some kind of a concept or an idea floating around that, in at least in the Hindu, or I don't know, like in this Eastern system, there's also an idea that desire is the root, and desire is the root of all, like, not evil, but like suppressing of desire is somewhat uh, mixed with contentment, or like, there is some confusion in my head around that.
There are desires that are not harmful desires. For example, like the desire for a partner. That's we all need love, and a desire for a partner is to have a human expression of love.
Yeah.
And so that there's the human need for that. There is the desire to provide for your children. Well, that's a human need, right? That's just a very practical thing. Desires become harmful when they become an obsession, really. And you want one thing doesn't satisfy, so you want another. Uh, and it's unending. So it becomes almost like a contagious thing that you can't control. So it's a matter of seeing whether desires are going to help you reach your goal, or whether they're going to be a distraction and lead you off into an alley, sort of like a side road. For example, if you desire wealth, well, when does it become enough?
Yes.
And so when you have this perpetuation of desires, it's very hard to have contentment. And
Mm.
contentment is really a spiritual quality of just um, being living in a state of gratitude and acceptance. It doesn't mean that you don't strive to achieve things, but you strive without being attached to the results of your actions. Striving is good because we need initiative. If we didn't have initiative, we wouldn't. I mean, it takes a lot of initiative to pursue a spiritual path.
Yes.
That
Also,
takes striving,
and that is
and so
sorry to interrupt, Dina, but that is also a desire that not everybody has that desire also. So, working on
no
a
helpful desires. I mean, the desire for realization is implanted in all of us, but many people are not yet at the point where that is an overwhelming desire. There's still other things, when you in the whole journey through life, and as I said, all the different many chapters, when you desire something and then you get it, well, the fulfillment doesn't last for long. How often people yearn for a partner, they get the partner, and then within a few years,
yeah, yeah,
you sort of forget to be grateful and how much you wanted that. And it's just desires are not designed to satisfy our deepest impulses. And that's the danger of them. We think if only I had that, I would be happy. And then you get that. And there's only one thing that brings true joy and happiness, and that's union with the divine, because that's our true nature.
Hmm. Everything else is a bit transient. Yes. But my personal view, Dina, is that yes, I mean, there is no end to desires, there is no end to greed and everything. But like you said, that there are certain fair desires and then there are obsessive desires. At the point of fair desires, I think it becomes a matter of self-awareness that yes, this is something like I say that if you're hungry, And when you're satiated, And when you're satiated, you do not want to eat food at that time. So I personally,
one of the qualities on the spiritual path that is needed to progress is having a strong will.
Hmm.
Because if you don't have a strong will, it's very hard to develop a deep meditation practice because there are so many distractions. So there are many ways that life offers to develop that willpower. And one of them is to achieve things that you desire.
Yeah.
So you want to provide for your family more than just provide. You want to give them things, right? Well, you start a business or you go into business and you have to work hard to make it successful. Well, you're strengthening the muscle of will,
Yeah.
which will later on help you in your spiritual path. So, a lot of life experiences are to help us strengthen these muscles that are needed for self-realization, really. And so, you spend, and sometimes a life is spent just cultivating one spiritual quality. And so, developing your will, you need a strong will in order to manifest.
Hmm. Hmm.
So we were talking about the level of manifestation where you're thinking of somebody and they appear before you, or somebody's in your thoughts and they call you. That's one level of manifestation. But to manifest a bigger vision, you need a stronger will. I say to young people, you've got to manifest the world you want to create for your children.
Hmm.
Why, Led? I think a lot about the future and all the dystopian stories that are out there. And I say, why are we allowing others to create that future? It's a matter of visioning. First, you have to have a vision before you can manifest. So people who start businesses, they have a vision. I want to create a business that does this. And they have to work. It could take years and years to turn that vision into a reality. Well, I mean, it's the same thing in terms of what kind of society we want to live in. We have to have a vision. What are the principles of that society? First, what are the values of that society? So, that's another way of strengthening a spiritual muscle, the muscle of visioning. Willpower. Willpower is a spiritual muscle. Visioning is a spiritual muscle. Self-control um, is a spiritual. If you want to achieve something, if you want to create a business, you're going to need to save money for it, which means that you have to have some self-control, not go spend it on lavish vacations. So it's a matter of all of these qualities that are qualities that need to be developed for a strong spiritual life that we get to exercise in the world to create the lifestyle that we need or want. And so we should look at them as developing our spiritual muscles so that when we do turn it to spiritual realization, those muscles will be well developed.
Hmm. Tina, I mean, what is it right? I just want to check, like, now what I've started to think is that I just want to remove the I and become a conduit of what the higher self or higher energy or whatever is meant to be created through me, that I be the open channel for it. And
Well, that is a very important spiritual practice, actually, because the goal is to put aside the ego so that we can experience our oneness with the divine. And so if we devote our life to being a channel for the divine, in other words, doing things that are uplifting, not pursuing ego gratification, then that's part of our sadhana.
okay, yes, beautiful.
I always say that meditation is only half of our sadhana. The other half is how we take that meditation into the world, how we react to things in the world, how we conduct ourselves in the world. Then we get to really see, is the meditation working? Because the meditation is about self-transformation. It's about transforming the little self so that we can realize the greater self. That's the whole purpose of meditation. And when we function in the world, we get to see the extent to which we're doing that. Are we making progress? Are we able to act not from ego desire, but from the desire to be a channel for the divine?
Yes, 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 beautiful. And so, and also, Dina, I mean, I think when the popular media,
Popular.
people are talking about all of this thought manifestation, I'm going back to where the penny dropped for me is that when Lord Krishna in the Gita said that you do your karma. So action is a very important element of this whole thought manifestation process as well, I suppose.
That's where we that's the sadhana is twofold. It's our meditation, which is needed, and Krishna talks about that. And then we go into the field of action. And are we acting from ego for ego gratification? Are we act, in other words, do we want to build a big enterprise so that we can become an important person? Or do we want to build an enterprise so that we can provide, serve society, provide for the family? So is it coming from ego or not? And so when the battle was going on, was Arjuna fighting to become a king?
Yes, he was not actually.
Um, or was he fighting because to undo the wrong that had been done and to improve things for society? So that's where you get to see, and that's Krishna's whole thing, is to surrender the fruits of your actions. You're fighting for dharma, not to build your ego, not to become an important person, not to, lord over the world, not to display your wealth. And so many, I mean, if you look at the power figures in the world today, it's about power. It's about exerting power or displaying wealth. That's completely coming from ego. But I mean, that's like the opposite
Yeah.
of how we should behave in the world. Because whether you have power or wealth, it should be in for service, to serve the divine purpose, to help uplift the vibrational field of Earth. I mean, we greatly need to participate, all of us need to participate in the movement of the yugas into a higher era. And that takes the effort of all of us. It's a collective effort. And it means not acting from a place of ego, but acting from a place of service.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so Krishna said, "Yes, go do your battle," because the battle had to take place. It was the same thing with the battle against Ravana was desecrating the earth and oppressing people, and he had to be countered. But it was not with anger, but with compassion and love that he had to be countered. I mean, we all face in every era this battle against those who seek to oppress uh, and and uh, um, and seek to ravage, and we all have to engage in that battle. And the challenge is to do it not from a place of anger, but to do it from a place of dharma, of knowing that to preserve the earth, to preserve the well-being of our fellow animals and plants and humans, we have to battle the forces of greed and arrogance and oppression.
Wow.
That's the field of action.
That's the field of action. And going back to where we started from, that the consciousness that was so high in the beginning of the Treta Yuga that uh, that you said that basically that thought manifestation was there because unification was there in any case.
That was the Satya Yuga. And in the Treta Yuga, it began to decline. And I'm fascinated with the battle against Ravana. It was the first battle that we have record of, really, at such a grand scale, right? And so just as there's been a lot of commentary on the significance of the Mahabharata as an inner battle, it was the same thing with the battle in Lanka. It was a battle because Ravana was inserting into the collective mind um, this ego consciousness of greed. He epitomized greed and arrogance and domination. And those things were not prevalent before. But it's a declining Treta Yuga, and Ram and Sita appeared in the latter, toward the end of the Treta Yuga. So these forces of greed and arrogance and domination were beginning to spread into the collective, and Ravana had a big part in that. And and so the effort was to control or to counter those forces because the communities lived in harmony before that. I mean, there was no hierarchy, there was no discrimination, there was no caste system, there was no oppression of women. I mean, it was an egalitarian society basically that harmoniously worked. But this was being disrupted. And by the end of the Treta Yuga, we have, a whole different reality where there's the pursuit of wealth and the pursuit of domination begins to come in and of one group over another. And so you see the decline in consciousness, and that was a critical point in human development, that battle, because you see the decline in consciousness that Ram and Sita had to take birth to help to counter those negative attributes.
Right. Right. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Dina. This has been very, very insightful. My one final question is somewhere along in the discussion you touched upon that we're at the start of the Dwapar Yuga or something, and that the consciousness it has to be a collective effort. And do you want to just give us some insight into what kind of collective effort are you referring to or are you envisioning that would take us to higher levels?
So it's a very sort of challenging time as we move into an era where there's a lot of technological advancement without the accompanying spiritual advancement as a collective, right? So, we've developed nuclear power in the last century, and yet we don't have the wisdom to ensure that it won't be used in a harmful way. We've now moved into a whole nother reality of AI. Do we have the wisdom to ensure it won't be used in a negative way? We see how the internet has brought incredible benefits. We couldn't have had this conversation that would listen to people around the world without that. And yet it's also produced a lot of harm through misinformation, through the spread of pornography, because humanity is not yet spiritually developed to ensure that it's not used in a harmful way. So we all have a part. The greater and the deeper the meditative community is, the more likely we are to affect the collective. And so the most important thing right now is that we all give a lot of time to our spiritual sadhana because we're influencing the collective. And, I've become increasingly aware of that in these past few months, the role that each one of us, every human being, plays in influencing the collective. And we don't realize it. You know, every time we experience anger or say harmful things about others, we're adding a cloud to the collective. And every time we express generosity and kindness, we're clearing a cloud in the collective. And so our actions make a huge difference. And I think that's the most important thing for us to realize right now, to really watch our minds and our actions, our behaviors, our attitudes, to ensure that we're only adding light to the planet and we're not reinforcing the negative qualities.
Dina, I have a very important question that's coming to my mind here right now. Is that when you said that internet is spreading all kinds of information, I also feel, and I think that's why this topic became so important for us to bring up, perhaps, is because now most people are also equating meditation with sitting there and visualizing their desires, because that's what the mainstream social media is like spreading, right? So how does one actually, the I'm talking of the 20 somethings and 30 somethings, they're understanding spirituality as individual desire manifestation?
I mean, that's nothing to do with spirituality. We know it's pursuit of desires, and social media reinforces desires because of the algorithms. Where if they see that you like something, they'll just flood you with very similar things. You buy one thing, and you're flooded with, oh, buy this, buy that, buy that, and every person has to learn self-control. I mean, you have to learn how to tune it out. You have to learn um, to monitor your social media use and to try to use it for positive things, to communicate with family, to communicate with friends, to share positive thoughts, and not to. I mean, it is there's a lot of attention now on how it harms young people, particularly teenage girls. And I think that we need to, if we are the mother of teenage girls, or if we have children, it's very important to limit and monitor how they're exposed to social media. I mean, once you get older, you know how to limit it. But it's insidious, and I have to keep reminding myself of the positive uses because sometimes I say we'd be better off without it. But it's created a global community which we didn't have before because of the way it's facilitated communication. So there are many positives, but every positive has a negative, and I mean, look, what it says, 80 years later, we're still struggling with this thing of atomic weapons. You'd think we could have solved this problem. But as long as we have, the certain traits within ourselves, competitiveness and distrust and fear and all of that, as long as humanity has those things, we're gonna be in the drama,
Yeah.
and so we have to do our part, which is to rise above fear, to rise. I mean, there's so many things that can awaken fear now, right? So many things, and all this misinformation and fear of this and fear of that, and it takes effort to reject it. To reject it. I'm not going to live in a state of fear. I'm not going to live in a state of anger. I'm not going to live in a state of judgment. I'm going to live in a state of love and um, and
Generosity.
generosity and giving.
Yes, 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 yes. My question was more around like the interpretation of like, when you're talking, I'm grasping it because I've been through that whole process of understanding what Ashtanga yoga is, what is like all of those things. So, I understand quite easily when you talk of collective consciousness and what we are feeding into the collective consciousness. But right now in the collective consciousness, if for the younger generation, what's feeding in is that closing your eyes and sitting means visualizing manifestation of your desires.
Uh, People may have to go through that to realize that the desires don't bring happiness.
Okay.
Yeah, you manifest, you're visualizing how to manifest your desire. Well, in some way, you're strengthening your mental powers. You achieve that desire. Are you happy? Is
Yeah.
that enough? You've reached contentment? No, most likely not. There's another desire that creeps in, and you have to visualize and manifest that. Okay, you're strengthening that muscle, that mental muscle of manifestation. But and that's a good thing. But the desire is not going to bring you happiness. At a certain point, you say, why aren't I happy? This is not bringing me happiness.
Yeah.
And you start to look deeper for how do you achieve, what is happiness, what is that peace and joy, because desires are disrupt one's peace. When you're pursuing desires, you're not at all peaceful. And so it's twofold. Yes, the power to visualize and manifest is a useful thing. It develops that muscle which is needed for spiritual advancement. However, you're using it for something that's not going to get you where you want to go.
And I guess
It's
that,
sidetracking.
yes. And yeah, that just totally makes sense because that's exactly how my spiritual journey started is when you say that, okay, this is all so transient. Where is that real peace? Like, and that's probably how people start on their spiritual journeys in any case. Yes.
And I think people go through a phase, where they will engage in that kind of practice, and then they outgrow it. I mean, we all go through many phases on the spiritual journey. And so, but the ultimate truth is that there's nothing in the external world that can bring us the joy and peace that we seek. It's only internally.
Beautiful, Dina. This has been lovely talking to you. Is there anything else, or final words for the audience for this episode?
I think we're on this sort of like grand adventure together, and I think to know that each one of us has a part to play, and that gives us a responsibility, and and um, and we'll see how much, by becoming more mindful and more aware of our responsibility, we'll see how much we progress.
Lovely, Dina. Thank you so much once again for your time and all the beautiful wisdom that we've taken from you today. Thank you so, so, so very much.
Care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.